Director of New Media and Digital Communications, Michelle Whitaker, is on the phone and on the computer. And Shaw Brewer, our healthcare fellow, is also on with us during this presentation. In addition, later on you will hear from Kristen Kumpf, our Director of Organizing, as she talks to you about and listens to you and engages you in a dialogue around the organizing work that's happening on the ground in your area, your state, your local area, or your local area. At this time, I'd like to invite Marilee Weininger, the Tennessee Annual Conference staff and our healthcare organization leader in Tennessee, to open us with prayer.
Good morning, everybody. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for being present with us during this time together. We acknowledge that we have closed our minds, doors, and hearts to our brothers and sisters with disabilities. We ask that you help us to break down the barriers that cause others to stumble, to open our hearts and our hands widely enough to care for all who are in need, and to speak in such a way that models your grace and love. Please be with us to guide this conversation and grant us the courage to ask difficult questions and make faithful decisions. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, and through the power of the Holy Spirit, all of God's children say, Amen.
Thank you, Marilee. The topic of today's call is removing barriers, how to be more disability friendly. Different kinds of barriers will be discussed, including ways to remove them. An advocacy update on the Convention on the Rights of the Global Disabilities Treaty will follow the presentation. The call is being recorded for playback purposes for participants and your invitees, and will be available on our website following the call. This call will be in listen-only mode for participants until the question and answer period. At this time, I'd like to introduce Michelle Whitaker for any additional technological announcements.
Hi, Cynthia, and hello, everyone. As you can see, there's a chat area on the left side of your screen if you're attending the webinar portion. And if you have any questions, you can post it to that area. In addition, if there are other technical questions that do come up, there's the ability for you to indicate and send a message, particularly to me, to let me know that you are having an issue, and I can work to address that. When we do get to the Q&A portion, I will unmute your line so that you can ask questions. And please, again, let me know if there's any questions that you do have, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Michelle. At this time, I'd like to introduce our guest presenter, Sharon McCart. Sharon is the daughter and granddaughter of United Methodist ministers, born and raised in California. All of her life, she has known people with disabilities, from her grandmother's neighbor who was blind, to her friend in MYF who had Williams syndrome, to her many friends with many types of disabilities today. Following in her grandmother's footsteps, she was a special education teacher for a decade before feeling God's call to ministry. Seminary trained, she is serving in disability ministries at both the annual conference and the denominational level as the facilitator of the California Pacific DisAbility Ministries Task Force and as the chair of the Disability Ministries Committee of the United Methodist Church. She teaches, preaches, consults, coordinates, and advises in these roles, all the while grateful to God that she is part of this important work. She has been especially busy this year as a primary writer, teacher, leader on the UMW mission study focus on disabilities. Her leadership and organization of the report to her annual conference session this year, the California Pacific Annual Conference, was noted as extremely engaging and one of the most interesting presentations in recent memory by many people present. Next month, a video of this presentation will be featured on the GBCS website, along with an article by Sharon. We welcome Sharon to the call, and as I turn it over to Sharon, be ready with your to take a look at your PowerPoint as she walks us through this wonderful and meaningful presentation. Sharon?
Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate very much the invitation to be here today. Excuse me, I'm not familiar with this technology. Michelle, I need a little help.
I'm switching you over.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The name of my presentation this morning is Disability Practicing Inclusion, but it's also about breaking down the barriers to inclusion. And I invite you to actually think about the barriers that you see in your own settings as we go through this, and then ask questions at the end. So I'm now on the slide that says Barriers to Inclusion, if you are following along on your own computer. So what I want to talk about today is what keeps people with disabilities from being included in church and what prevents them from participating fully in the life of our faith communities. The first type of, there are several types of barriers: architecture, communication, awareness, attitude, and then if you know others, I would be very grateful actually to learn about what barriers that you see. Architectural barriers include stairs, rough pathways, narrow doors, obstacles, no seating choices, and there are more. This picture shows an interesting pathway that's partially blocked by a fence and the other part is blocked by a curb. And that pathway actually leads up to the ramp to the church. So I don't really know how people are supposed to get there. Communication barriers. For the visually impaired, too small print gets in the way. For those who are hearing impaired, no hearing assistance. For the deaf, no sign language or captioning. And for people particularly with autism, but with also other disabilities, the expectations may be unknown or unclear to them. Lack of awareness is really the first barrier. People don't realize that anything needs to be changed in their church, and they don't know what to change or how to change it. They don't know anything about disabilities, and they don't even know that there's a problem. Attitude is the hardest barrier to overcome. I just ran into this the other night when I was talking about children with autism, and one lady said, "Are you talking about those children who just run around and around and don't sit still?" She obviously didn't want them in the church with her. Everyone should be like us is the key attitude, and there's no compassion or empathy. People don't want to change, and so they're unfriendly and unwelcoming to people who are different. The other attitude is, well, we don't have any money to do anything. So there are other barriers, and if you can think of those, you can either put them in the chat box or bring them up when we're doing the question and answer section. Removing barriers. This is the practical part of my presentation, where I talk about how we can break down the barriers and practice inclusion in our own congregations. There are many ways to do this. Some of them are very simple, and some of them don't even cost any money. Others can be very expensive and are more difficult. But there's a lot you can do just with some creativity. For architecture, that's always the most expensive, honestly. To install ramps and to widen doors sometimes can cost a lot of money. Grab bars are actually fairly cheap. Signage is really often overlooked. If you have an accessible path of entry, do people know how to go when they're getting out of their cars in the parking lot? Can they see the accessible path? Is there a sign that points the way? or do they wander around and try to figure out just how they're going to get into the building? Pew cuts. This picture shows a church in Alabama that Martin Luther King was at years ago, where he started the civil rights movement. And they have two places where there are pew cuts. You can see toward the middle there that there are two pews that are cut shorter. You need to cut two in a row so that there's room for a chair to maneuver, a wheelchair to maneuver in and out of that space. And we want to be able to give people choices of where to sit. So to have the pew cuts in a couple of different areas and not just in the back or not just in the front. Give them a choice of where to go. And that helps people a lot. There are a lot of other architectural things to do. If you need to renovate a bathroom to be a large enough space for a power chair to maneuver, you might have to combine actually two smaller bathrooms into one. And there are a lot of other ways to improve the architecture, even on our older churches. You can install lifts or elevators. A lot of, in fact, most churches, I would say, have the chancels are not accessible. And a lot of times a lift is the only way to resolve that situation because there isn't room for a ramp inside the sanctuary. Accessible restrooms, railings. Anytime you have a walkway like the one shown in this picture that has a slope of greater than 1 to 20, you are, even if it does have 1 to 20, you need railings on both sides to help people in manual chairs work their way up. Sometimes people in walkers need that help, and also people who even use canes can use that assistance in going up the slope. Automatic doors are prevalent in businesses, but we don't often see them in churches. And sometimes that is the only way to allow people to actually get into our sanctuaries without assistance from someone else. Communication is the next barrier. Some of this is easily solved with large print bulletins. That doesn't cost really a lot, and you can do that fairly easily. Just make a few copies on the larger size paper. Assistive listening systems come in several ways. There are infrared systems. There are systems that work with people's hearing aids. They just have to turn on their T-coil in their hearing aid, and their provider of their hearing aid can actually show them how to do that. Your website should be accessible, and by that I mean there are ways to make the website workable with a screen reader. People who are blind use screen readers to hear what is in front of them on the computer. That's the way they access the internet. And if your website is not accessible, they won't be able to tell anything that's going on at your church. Live captioning is shown in the little picture on the right. This is basically just like on TV. Whatever is shown, whatever is being said is shown on the screen. So you have somebody typing on a specialized keyboard and it pops up on the screen. And no, it's not perfect, but at least people who can't hear and don't know sign language can participate in the worship service that way. If you have an assistive listening device system, it's required to put up a sign so that people know you have it. And that can be put on the screen, it can be put on the wall, it can be put in your bulletin. And also, it's always an option to hire an American Sign Language interpreter for your services if you have someone that speaks sign. Awareness can also be overcome by holding disability awareness or access Sundays. This can be done in several ways, but the main point is to have people with disabilities actually leading in worship. Not just talk about them, but let them plan it, let them lead it, let them be part of it. The pictures on this screen show on the very left is a young man who has autism. He is completely nonverbal, but he uses an iPad to write essays and poetry. And when he participates in worship, his best friend, who is standing next to him, reads what he has written. And he has written some very powerful pieces. The girl in the middle has cerebral palsy and walks with a crutch. She is right now teaching Sunday school and helping in that way at church. The girl on the right is autistic and has many social problems, but she sings like an absolute angel. And those are the kind of gifts that we want to highlight. Not what they cannot do, but what they can do. Training for Sunday school teachers and other leaders helps. If our Sunday school teachers are prepared for children who have differences, they can more easily accommodate the difference in learning needs of our children. If they're not learning the way we're teaching, maybe we should teach the way they learn. And that's become an axiom. And there are many resources for that. I am seeing, are there any recommendations for Sunday school curriculum for adults with developmental disabilities? So this also applies to our teachers of our adults. Currently, the DisAbility Ministries Committee of the United Methodist Church has a team working on Sunday school curriculum and curriculum for confirmation. So that is being addressed. Keep an eye out for that. There are also links on our website to other denominational resources for curriculum that you can access there. One thing that I recommend, the one church I visited has the children in worship, and so I set up a table at the back of the room and had different sensory activities for the children with autism. So when they couldn't sit still anymore, they had something else to do. Other ways to raise awareness are disability studies, Bible studies. You can have a disability ministries team at your church to be interfacing with the people who have disabilities at your church and find out where the sticking points are, where the problems are, and keep on track of that. You can have guest speakers who have disabilities to help educate, training for church leaders, as I said, and you can have a program to identify everyone in the congregation's spiritual gifts, which includes all the people with disabilities as well. Attitude, like I said, address different learning styles. These pictures are actually from a program called Messy Church that we have here in Calpac, and I would highly recommend that if you want to really reach out to the community. This is kind of like Vacation Bible School once a month for everybody in the community. It was developed originally to reach the unchurched. It turns out it's so perfect for children with different learning styles / disabilities. We can also change our worship. Instead of expecting people to conform to the way we've always done worship, we can have it be more hands-on, more intergenerational so that the children are welcome. We can have it be okay to make noise and move around. Fellowship, crafts, worship, supper, all kinds of things to just foster that relationship between people as well as with God. Don't dumb it down, but use easy to understand language with a lot of visual aids and engaging stories, which will quite honestly help all of us that are in worship together. So many people these days are allergic to different chemicals, so I highly recommend fragrance-free zones. There are people that cannot come to church because everybody's wearing cologne and everybody's wearing perfume and different scented hair products or whatever, and they literally get ill from coming to church. Have a no stress policy Some of you already do this in your church, where it's okay to say amen or preach it, brother, or whatever in the service. We need to really encourage more of that. This next slide is an accessibility welcome kiosk. There are many ways to do this. It's a place outside the sanctuary, so in your narthex or outside the door, have a table that has the large print bulletins, copies of the sermon, the assistive listening devices, large print hymnals and Bibles, and a print version of all the PowerPoint slides that you use. So that way everybody can access and knows what's going on in the service. You can assign a companion or a mentor to children or adults who have needs of a little bit more help to understand what's going on in the service, and also in Sunday school. Assistive listening systems, I talked about this already a little bit. One thing that's my pet peeve is all speakers in the service need to use a microphone all the time. So if somebody tells you they have a big voice, tell them they need to use the microphone anyway, because there are people that will not hear without it. A committee microphone system is if you have people sitting at a table, a panel, then you have a microphone that everybody can use. For those who are deaf, this is reasonably obvious. Live captioned worship, I talked about already. Videos need to be captioned or in print, and I do see a message here that are too often our own UMC and GBCS videos are not captioned. This is a true problem that the Disability Committee is working on through UM Communications and other powers that be. We hope that we will have this taken care of soon. You can also offer sign language interpreters, but the easiest is probably printed copies of the sermon and other spoken word so that people can follow along. The majority of people who have hearing impairment will not come to church anymore once they cannot hear the speaker. So if you want to keep people involved in church, this is very important. For those who are blind, and I haven't been modeling this very well right now, but for those who are blind, describe all videos and pictures. This can be done by somebody sitting next to them, speaking quietly to them when things are being shown. Braille hymnals and bulletins. Service animal policies, of course, if somebody has a service animal, they should be allowed in church. Assistance when needed, but always offer, if you're traveling from place to place in the building, offer your elbow. Don't take their arm, but say, would you like to take my elbow? And make sure there's no obstacles or things sticking out into hallways and aisles that they could run into without knowing. Outreach programs. Camping is a fun activity that so many of us have had life-changing experiences. Camp should be accessible to everybody. The top picture is a picture of a shower at a camp in Arizona, and it's actually a roll-in shower. It's better than a lot of the showers I've seen in motels in the camp. So that camp was really doing its best to be accessible to everyone. We can also advocate for employment. We ourselves in the churches can hire people with disabilities to work in our churches. Housing. The lower picture shows a ramp that our Sierra Service Project group here in California built for someone's house. And I'm currently putting together another work team to build ramps for churches and homes. We can also work with people with disabilities. I know several churches that have the local high school special education class come and help fold the bulletins and come and do the yard work and gain some vocational skills that way. So now I ask for a commitment on your part. What barriers will you try to remove? First, name your own barriers that you see in your setting, and then make a commitment to try something to resolve or remove those barriers. I think it's important to end this with some sort of a thought in mind of what it is that you could do. And if you don't have any idea, please ask me. Resources. These are just some of the resources, and more are listed at the top one. umdisability.org is a one-stop place that will link you to both the DisAbility Ministries Committee website, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing website, and the United Methodist Ministers with Disability website. So please check that. There are a lot of resources there. In fact, you could spend probably days going through all those resources that are there. So please check that. And also there's a link to sign up for our newsletter, which is called The Voice. Comes out about 4 times a year by email, so we're not killing trees. And it's very useful. Our spring issue was on emergency planning and people with disabilities, and it was excellent. Accessibility audits, which are required by the Book of Discipline for every church to do one annually, are there. And then these 2 magazines, New World Outlook in May and June, focused on disability, and also the UMW magazine, Response. Their May issue was focused on disability. And with that, I will turn this back over to Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Before we begin our question and answer period, I'd like to spend a moment talking to you about how you can be an advocate on policy issues related to disabilities. And I'd like to talk to you about the Global Disability Treaty, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, also known as CRPD. Ratification of the CRPD is a critical piece in our advocacy efforts here at the General Board of Church and Society. And over 144 countries have already ratified this global treaty. The last country to do this was in April. Palestine ratified the treaty. Unfortunately, the United States has not ratified the treaty. They came very close to ratifying the treaty about 2 years ago, but unfortunately, a coalition of groups, which I will speak about in a minute, managed to cause a last-minute obstacle to the passage in Congress of ratification of the treaty. The treaty is critical for not only for other countries, and basically what it contains, the treaty, is patterned after our own American Disabilities Act, and providing key points of accessibility and other accommodations for people with disabilities in other countries. If you have traveled to another country, you know that in several countries, especially in developing countries, there is not the same accessibility standards as there are in the United States, which prevents people from the United States from traveling to those countries. But more importantly for us, as a church, it provides obstacles for people in those countries to full participation in the life of their country and in regular daily life. And so it's very important that this treaty be ratified, and obviously because the U.S. has not ratified it, that speaks volumes about what our commitment is to people with disabilities around the world. If you know a little bit about this treaty, it does also affect employment by United States citizens who travel and work in other countries. If a person who has disabilities works for a company that offers positions outside of the United States and they want to continue to work in that company, they may not be able to take a job outside of the United States if there's not accommodation for them in terms of the disability standards here in the United States. So it's a barrier for people with disabilities in the United States to be employed outside of our country in countries that don't have those standards. In addition, it's a barrier to employment for people in those countries to be fully engaged in employment. So it's a key advocacy piece for us as a church and for you as individuals, for our churches, for our annual conferences, to be in contact with our members of Congress and to alert them to our commitment, to your commitment, and why it's important for people to be involved in that. If you would like to learn more about the Disability Treaty, you can go to the website www.disabilitytreaty.org. That's www.disabilitytreaty.org. Let me just say a word about the opposition to this, so that if you would like to, as you go on to that website, click on the action alert and take action, or if you're going to call or write your member of Congress individually, let me share a little bit of the context so that you might be able to respond to that. Two main groups emerged, and one of them, the most influential, was the homeschooling network in the United States. The homeschooling network contacted their members of Congress with misinformation about how it might attack the sovereignty of people who are doing homeschooling of their children and require onerous standards for them around ADA, which was false information related to the ADA, as well as there are people who oftentimes are libertarian in their ideology, maybe libertarian in their ideology, and think that it will attack the sovereignty of U.S. law, and it does not indeed have any impact on current U.S. law. In fact, we already have standards over and above what is already contained in the treaty. So these are false arguments in a sense, and you can receive more information about these arguments and about why it's a compelling interest for us for us in our communities. And lastly, let me say that a broad coalition of over 750 U.S. disability, civil rights, faith, business, and veteran organizations support the U.S. ratification of the Convention on the Rights of People with Disability, holding that American leadership in this arena is critical to the ultimate success of the treaty. And when you go on the website of the DisabilityTreaty.org, you can view a list of the supporters of the treaty there on that website. So with that, I'm going to stop there, and I am going to ask Michelle to open up the lines for question and answer, and then take our first question. And when you ask a question, I ask you to state your name, your location, either your church or annual conference or both, and then state your question.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. I just wanted to let everyone know I'm showing on the screen the DisabilityTreaty.org website so that you can go to that. Again, it's www.disabilitytreaty.org, and you can learn more information there. I will be opening the lines, and as Cynthia said, please make sure you state your name so that we can hear who you are and then hear the question that you're asking. So 1 second, I will open it up to discussion mode.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
We'll take our first question. I see a question on the chat line. Let me take that one first. The first question is from Gregory Hubert, and Gregory says, are there any experiences recommended for Sunday school curriculum for adults with developmental disabilities? Can you answer that question?
I'm sorry.
Hello?
I was having a problem. What was the question?
I'm getting feedback.
Yeah.
Hold on one second.
All attendees are muted.
Okay, Sharon,
Okay.
can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, let me take the question. Let me take the chat line questions first, Sharon, and then when she unmutes the phones again, then right now everyone is muted because for some reason we had feedback for the participants. And so we're going to try this again. I'm going to take the chat line questions, and I'll read the first question, Sharon, and then maybe, Sharon, can you see those chat questions as well?
I can, so let me just start at the top.
Okay.
Yeah, I already responded to Gregory a little bit during the presentation, but yes, there are, right now there's no United Methodist curriculum for adults with developmental disabilities. The DisAbility Ministries Committee has a team that is working to develop curriculum. I think their first goal is the confirmation curriculum, so that wouldn't be for adults. But we can certainly put that on the list. Right now, what I would recommend is there's a lot of resources at Christian Reformed Church website, and I don't have the URL right on the top of my head, but you can go to the Christian Reformed Church website, and there are many resources available there. You might have to tweak it a little bit for the theology maybe, but they have a lot there. You can also go to the United Church of Christ DisAbility Ministries website, and they also have resources there. If you have any more questions, you can contact me through Cynthia, and that would be fine, and let me do some more research about adult curriculum. Yeah, it's definitely a need that we have. Thank you. The next question I already kind of responded here too. Too often our own UMC and GPCS videos are not captioned. We have been working for a while with United Methodist Communication trying to get them to caption everything. And it's just, that seems to be a barrier that we can't quite knock down yet. Video transcript instead of captions would be a great idea. If people have a particular video they would like to start with, let me know that, and we can actually work on that and do kind of an end run around the larger problem of captioning. Are there any more questions there? I don't see any.
Okay. Sharon, we're going to open up the lines again and attempt this, and if we have feedback, then we're going to probably have to ask people to ask their questions on the chat line on their computer. So we're going to try this again. Michelle, will you open up the lines again so we can take questions?
Sure, I will open up the lines again, and if you aren't speaking at the moment, just press *6 to mute yourself so that we don't get that interference. And if you are on a computer listening, you may want to mute your speakers so again, so you're not getting feedback from your own microphone when you're saying something. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Okay. We'll ask you now, if you want to ask a question, to unmute your phone with *6 and state your name and your location and ask your question. Any questions? You may also unmute your phone to make a comment if you are also involved in DisAbility Ministries and you want to say something regarding your own work related to DisAbility Ministries.
Muted.
Hello. Hello. State your name.
State your name.
Okay, I'm seeing a question from Lupita. Should I just answer that? I'm getting echo again.
Yes, Sharon,
Yes,
please
Sharon,
answer the
please answer the
Okay, what sources are there available for local
churches
to make their
to make
churches
their churches
accessible?
accessible?
We are in need of a wheelchair lift and accessible
playground.
All
This is
attendees
a
are
difficult
muted.
question. This is a difficult question. Money is very tight right now for our committee. But there are grants available. They're only $500 each, but that's enough to get you started. And you can contact Patricia Magyar at GBGM for an application. I don't think we can fund everybody, but we can fund some. And so if you really, I encourage you, Lupita, to go ahead and apply for that. And contact me if you need more information about that. I hope that answered that question sufficiently. There are other grants available in different localities, but I don't have that information. But I certainly can do some more research for you if you need it. Sharon Ryder from Seattle is asking, saying that they have funding available for an ASL interpreter, but they are not having any success finding one. Do you have any suggestions as to where to find one? You might try your local community college or some other universities in the area that are teaching ASL, and see if they have students that would be willing to do that, or somebody who's recently graduated. I know at Christ Church for the Deaf in Baltimore, I know they use students regularly, and I think they just call that on-the-job experience. I don't think they get paid. If they do, they don't get paid much. So that's always an option, but I think your local community colleges have classes, or at least they may have classes in ASL. Janice is asking, is there a specific Sunday in the UMC to have Disability Awareness Sunday? Some conferences do and some do not. Here in CalPAC, it's the third Sunday in October, I guess the second Sunday in October, but mostly I would say just pick one when you're ready to have it. I think it's always acceptable to have it sometime rather than no time. So please just choose one. And there are resources for Accessibility Sunday available on the website as well. Okay, and Cynthia has posted the Reformed Church resource URL there, so thank you, Cynthia. Okay, Sharon's asking again, we have had some pushback regarding the difference between knowing sign language and interpreting. Is this an issue? Well, if you're getting pushback, I would say it's an issue, and you might need to talk in more detail about the people that are getting pushback. I can kind of connect this to any other interpretation of any language between two languages, and there is a definite skill involved in that interpretation. Knowing sign language may not quite get you to being an interpreter. I think only experience can get you there. I'm not real familiar with ASL interpreting except to watch it, so I can't really answer your question more than that. I would say find out the reasons for the pushback, and if the interpretation is not accurate or sufficient to some people, maybe that's the reason you're getting pushback and you need a more experienced interpreter. Gregory is asking, saying listening conditions are a huge architectural barrier too. True, that's true. If it isn't included in building design, it never happens after the fact. Meeting rooms, fellowship rooms, etc. often have very poor acoustics. Yes, it seems to me that many architects don't have much training in acoustics and sound reinforcement, and other than asking good questions when you're building or renovating a building of your architect, I would, or call in a sound engineer during the planning process. After the fact, a good sound engineer should be able to help you. Whether they can solve everything is another question. But yeah, it's definitely a barrier, hearing, and with so many of us getting older and losing some of our hearing, it's becoming an issue more and more. So thank you for that. Reverend Lupita is, yes, saying that we usually have disability awareness the last Sunday of October. So but it's kind of late to plan that, so I would say pick a date if you don't have it planned already. Lupita's also asking, how can we network better to help each other, bringing awareness and more encouragement to those who are currently working on behalf of disability issues? Networking is always a great thing. Capacity building and building those connections is my passion in this field. There are so many things being done, and we need to connect with each other so we're not all reinventing the wheel. Some of that happens on the Disability Ministries website, where we list what's happening in conferences or different connections with other conferences. So you can check there. Sharon Ryder in Seattle is saying get on Facebook. And yes, I do have a Facebook page, CalPAC Disability. Let me think what it's called. I named it before I knew what I was doing, so it's called CalPAC Resources for Ministry with People with Disabilities. So yeah, if you want to check out what I've done there, that's one connection. But also the Disability Ministries Committee has a Facebook page, United Methodist Committee on Disability Ministries. So you can check that out as well. And it has connections with Deaf and Hard of Hearing and other Facebook pages. Okay, and Cynthia's listing more websites for Disability Sunday awareness. And Dale is saying that has given the URL for my Facebook page as well. So you can find it that way. Janice says, let me make sure I didn't skip something. Janice says, I like your idea of having a location in the church or a table to let people know where there is information for accessible materials. I've taught Braille for years, and I'm thinking that I could do some Brailing of the bulletin for Awareness Sunday. Yes, Brailing, if you have a Brailer, that's completely wonderful. In fact, you could probably charge for services. So, at least in your area, or people could mail you things. I know also the Braille Institute will Braille a limited amount of materials for free. So that's also an option. Teaching Braille. Oh, well, that would be wonderful, Janice. That's terrific. Yeah, I think that's a needed skill, just to get people to understand that what it is they're doing with their fingers when they're doing that. Janice is also saying she's been an ASL interpreter, so she knows about the need for experience. So if you can help a student get an experience, or if you're looking for somebody to actually work for you long term as a interpreter, please ask for experience. I want to come visit, Janice, and see that Braille trail. Yes, are there any other questions? I appreciate all these questions. Or if you just want to share with me what you're doing at your church, that would be helpful as well. Okay, Sharon Ryder says, you have obviously been able to build a great amount of support in CalPAC for my disability committee. What suggestions do you have to build this support? I I never let a sleeping dog lie. I reach out to everyone, and if somebody has said something to me at some point about disability ministries, I always make it a point to get back to them. If and I just it was easy because I have a lot of friends in CalPAC. If you want to know more, you can read my article in New World Outlook. I believe that's available online on the GBGM website now. So you can, and I believe that's the one that Cynthia's planning to post next month. Or maybe I'm supposed to write something. But yeah, it is hard work and it is effort. But I always remind people what they're supposed to be doing by the Book of Discipline, by just good hospitality in our churches, and by the conference. So I have, I just keep those connections going, and that's how I do that. Who is saying this? Jenna says, we have a group in church called Helping Hands who do things for members and community in need. For example, I needed a ramp twice in a year, and they were there to build the ramp to code immediately. And then they passed them on to others in need. Every church should have a group like this. I agree. And if not every church, then at least every district of your conference. If you have mission teams that travel to, like we used to go to Mississippi, and this year I went to Maryland to help with Sandy recovery. If you have mission teams that go other places to work, they can figure out how to build ramps, and they can work in your own area. And I would highly suggest that. If you just have a group of handymen in the area, handymen and women in the area that can do things, you can put together a team that can help not only churches become more accessible, but people's homes. So, I would just say to put it out there. If you're willing to work and help people, then just, contact people. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Thank you, everyone, for these wonderful questions. And we are going to move on to the next piece, and I hope you'll stick with us because I think you'll find it very interesting. Our Director of Organizing, Kristen Kampf, is going to take updates from organizing teams and individuals, and I believe Marilee Weininger is on the phone as well, and she's going to give the first report from Tennessee around organizing on health care. So, Kristen, will you take it away?
Hope you all can hear me without a lot of feedback. This has been such an inspiring hour. I just want to thank Sharon and everyone for all of your comments, and I think that the questions are tremendous in terms of how to be connected, how to network, how to deepen the ministries that we have, how to continue to look for opportunities to work for greater access and justice. And I know that extends across our larger network in terms of focusing on multiple different kinds of healthcare issues and issues of justice and access. So we want to just have a space for folks who have reports to share from your local area or from your conference around what you're doing in terms of issues of healthcare and especially how you're bringing people together to do that. So I'm going to start with Marilee, and then if others want to follow suit and just share a quick story or report of what you're doing and any ideas you have or thoughts about next steps, we'd love to hear that. So Marilee, do you want to start us off?
I sure will. This is Marilee Weininger from the Tennessee Conference. Two of the things that we're working on right now, kind of hand in hand and side by side, is to vote no, or we can't claim that, right? Vote no on an amendment that will basically open up to be able to chip away at our privacy rights here in Tennessee, which we have one of the best privacy rights, and it's with women and their reproductive choice. So we are working on awareness and education for that. And then one of the things, or I would say several things that we are hoping to do in that time is to gather people to partake in a phone banking. And also, one of the win-wins for us is that it gives us the opportunity to talk to other social justice-minded people within the conference, to kind of touch base with folks we hadn't talked to in a while, and then at that same time learn what passions for ministry that they have. So that's been going good so far. The other thing that is ongoing for us is Medicaid expansion. This week, the NAACP held a mock funeral on our Capitol Hill here in Nashville, and then also in Knoxville and Memphis. It was just a wonderful experience. They brought a casket delivered by Hearst. Students from Tennessee, and I'm blanking on Tennessee. Never mind, I'll have to think of it. TSU, one of the colleges. Some of the gentlemen there skipped out on their exams to come and be pallbearers, and they were all dressed in black suit and white gloves and carried it up the Capitol steps and came together for a short program. Several ministers from the area did just rousing and heartfelt sermons and sharings, mini sermons. So that got a lot of media exposure. And also the other focus that we're really working diligently on is our Rural Ambassador Program. One of the coalition members that we are working closely with have gone through our conference and their maps on legislators who we could contact and be in conversation with throughout our conference, Middle Tennessee, and to put them together of where are the people who are in the gap, Medicaid gap, where are the legislators that are willing to be in conversation, and how can we as different districts that house those people, how can we bring those together to take a role as rural ambassadors, to be within their community, to educate their neighbors, and to be in conversation. So that is going well, and we're expanding more and more. And in Tennessee, it looks like our Cookeville area is one of the greatest, the biggest area with people in the gap. So that is our focus right now in that area. Let's see. There's some. I do have to say that Kristen and Cynthia, that I have actually shared the strategy chart from the Midwest Academy, and we are using that as a plan, the big picture for the Medicaid expansion, and then going to break it down to subcommittees working on specific tasks. So already out there being used.
Well, that's fantastic. Great, Marilee, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that and for all the different ministries and work that you are doing there on these different issues. Tremendous. So I want to hear from other folks who are on the line. If you want to share either over the phone or if you want to type in your comments, but it'd be great if just a few other people want to just share quick stories of what you're working on and how you're organizing and bringing people together around whatever your issue is in your area. Who wants to go next?
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6. All attendees are muted.
Great. Anyone want to try unmuting yourself? This is the moment. Okay, well, maybe with all of our technological pieces, we'll just sort of leave it at that. I know we've shared lots of stories and questions already in the previous part of our presentation. And again, I just want to encourage folks to continue to reach out to each other. I think the question, I think it was Lupita who's asked about networking, and I think that is one of the most important ways that we can not only keep ourselves inspired and connected for the long haul, but also to really find new and creative ideas and strategies to continue to move our ministries forward. So encourage folks to do that and to continue to think through whatever that next step is, and how do you invite people to join you in that. I think the things that Marilee just really inspired me by, and what you shared, Marilee, is that, what is that even just in the process of trying to talk to folks about different issues, is that you've been learning a lot about how folks feel about healthcare from within the Methodist churches of Tennessee. And so I think even as we continue our journeys, be it around disability rights or whatever our healthcare issues are, how do we continue to have conversations with people in our churches and in our conferences to see what their dreams and their visions and their ideas are for how we can make our churches more accessible and more connected, more working for justice around these different issues. So best of luck, folks, as you are doing that. And Cynthia, I'm going to turn it back to you for us to wrap up.
Thank you, Kristen. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I'm assuming everyone can hear me. I'd like to make a few final concluding remarks. One is to remind you once again that the presentation was recorded, and so you may be able to play that back at a later time for yourself or for others that you think may be interested in the presentation. In addition, you can look at the PowerPoint on our website on the call webpage up until this evening, and then that call webpage is going to transform itself into a link on our healthcare webpage. So you'll need to look for it on our healthcare webpage within our website. Finally, let me say to you that I'd love for you to participate in next month's call, and our next call date is Friday, November 21st at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll want to be on this call because the topic will be Ebola and advocacy responses to infectious diseases, and will feature top leaders from the Centers for Disease Control, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the medical community. So make note of that special topic and the call on Friday, November 21st at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And we thank you so much for participating in this call. And until next month, may God richly bless your ministries and justice actions. Goodbye.